Welcome everyone. My name is Stefan. I'm from Exin, and I will be the host today for our panel discussion about the history of Agile. I'm joined here today by Sam Zawadi and Arie from Bennekum. I will allow them to introduce themselves properly after I do some small introductions about the platform that we're using. So if you have any issue with GoToWebinar when it comes to sound or visuals, or you can't properly join, then the best way to fix this is always just to disconnect and then reconnect again. This fixes most of the most common issues. And after we've gone through our own questions at the end, we will try and get as many of the audience questions in as if we have time. So if you have any questions, there should be a question tab on the right, and you can leave your questions there. And then at the end, I will read them out to Arie and Sam. For now, we'll move on. Oh, I need to click my PowerPoint. So first of all, so today we're going to talk about Exin Agile Scrum, and more specifically the Agile Manifesto. It's 20th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. This is our program about Agile in our portfolio. And Arie is the chief examiner of Agile Scrum, so he has worked very closely with this program. But I will allow him to tell him that self. So I think I will start with Arie. Arie, maybe you can introduce yourself shortly.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, I'm saying hi to everybody. Sorry, struggling in. Yeah, well, it says on screen, right? So from the Netherlands, in the world of IT since 1987. I'm co-author of the Agile Manifesto. Before that, I was already working in what we call Agile today. I do a lot of work on that. I'm thought leader for humanity. I do cross-border transformations. I love that, the multicultural aspects, the cross-border aspects, making that work. Including the COVID times where we are in. And then for Exin, I'm the chief examiner when it comes to Agile and Scrum. I think that's the best short one I can give at the moment. Sam, can I get to you maybe?
Sure. My name is Sam Zawadi. I am a long-time practitioner of Agile. My background is more in delivery, change, and transformation. And that's the work I enjoy doing. I'm doing a lot of training recently as well. I'm also the founder of Agnostic Agile, and I work very closely with Arie on that and others. Yeah, and I've always been very passionate about Agile. I came into it with what is now quite a big meetup group based in London, the UK. I'm from London, but I'm currently living in lockdown Melbourne, Australia.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, like I said, I'm Stefan. I work for Exin, and yeah, I'm just going to be here as a host to read the questions out to the guys, and I will allow the actual answering and the expert opinions to them. So I think we can move on to the first question. So we're going to start basically at the beginning. So the Agile Manifesto 20th anniversary. So Arie, I'm going to start with you, considering you were one of the co-authors of the manifesto. So basically the question is, there were already Agile software developments back at the day before the Agile Manifesto was written, like DSDM and Scrum. Why was it then necessary to write an Agile manifesto?
Yeah, well, so if you ask, maybe the other authors have their own opinion about this, right? But if you look back at when we met in Salt Lake, the session had the purpose to write the manifesto. That was the real purpose to doing so. We were there with 17 people. Everyone was working totally in a different way compared to traditional waterfall ways of working for some years. I know people who started working differently in 1998. I started working differently in 1994. Other people's maybe earlier, I don't know. The reason of bringing a manifesto out was to make a statement, because we were all, in our own, let's say, ecosystem doing this, what we were doing. But you could see that worldwide, as we still see today, by the way, because if you read the Dutch newspapers, it scares you like shit. If you see how money is wasted, right, in a lot of environments. Okay, let's join forces, understanding that all of us were working in a different way, right? We have 4 people representing Scrum, 2 people representing extreme programming, and the rest that their own individual methodologies that they represented, like I represented DSDM. But it was about making a statement and saying, hey, the problems in the waterfall, can we avoid those? Yes, we can. And here it's not just one. There are so many ways of handling the different problems that we have in the waterfall, and Agile is covering all of them. and that's the good part. So I think the power of the manifesto is the fact that it bundles all those different ways of working with all the different ways of looking at the most important problems to solve. If you ask James Grenning, you know, he was from TDD. He has a passion. He will say he's 72. If you call him now and who are you? He will say, you know, what are you doing? He will say, you know, I'm a software engineer with a passion for quality. He was focusing on improving the quality of what we delivered. And for me, value, value, value. And other people, you know, especially in the Scrum area on efficiency. Everybody had his own ways, but we brought it together and offering to anyone who's interested the full spectrum. And I think that's helpful. No, still is, by the way.
Yes, thank you for your answer. I'm gonna maybe ask Sam. So you, Sam, you weren't there when the Agile Manifesto was written, of course. You were, you know, shown to it later, but maybe you also already had experience with other, you know, Agile ways of working like the Scrum or DSM. How did you experience the Agile Manifesto when you first read it?
You know, that's a great question. I was getting a training course today on just Agile Foundations for a client I'm working with. And of course, in any Agile Foundations training course, you'll cover the manifesto and talk about it. And I remember saying that, you know, part of the working agreement of our course was, let's try to have an open mind. If you're new to Agile and you've done things a certain way for the last few years, and now you've come across these new concepts, it can cause a reaction in you. So try to have an open mind. And I told them a story about myself when I first came across Agile, way back when. I was traditionally a project manager, a traditional delivery project manager, waterfall. And I remember when I first encountered these Agile concepts and the Agile Manifesto, there was a reaction in me. I'm not going to lie. It was like, oh well, you know, this is fluffy, this is blue sky stuff, has no basis in reality. But you know, when you have this open mind and when you approach things non-judgmentally, that's when you have the learning outcomes. And so very slowly, the principles and the ideas, when I really listened and read what the manifesto was saying, these ideas are pretty much timeless. You know, the spirit is pretty much timeless. And so for me, I've got, from that point onwards, I delved into first into DSDM because I was a project manager back then. And Agile PM or DSDM is an absolutely great transitionary framework, especially for project managers who are moving towards an Agile way of working. I had a lot of success with Agile PM or DSDM. And I've also had, of course, a lot of success since then with Lean Kanban, which is one of my favorite methods, Scrum, of course, and various other scaling methods. But to finish that off, I've come to the point, what I love to do and what Agnostic Agile is all about is really understanding what these universe of practices are and really trying to tailor these things for your own context to create an agility that works for you.
Okay, thank you for your insights. Yes, both of you. I think we can go on to the next question. So this one is about the lean principles. So it has some similarities to the previous question, but basically the lean principles have been around for also since the end of the 19th century. And how was lean an inspiration for not just the Agile Manifesto, but also maybe Agile in general? And is that essence of lean still there today in how people work Agile? Sam, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Well, I won't comment on how it was an inspiration for the Agile Manifesto. I'll let Arie do that. But for me, is the essence of lean still there today? I think it is. I think it absolutely is. And, you know, lean, when we started looking at the history of Agile and when we start looking at these ideas of value streams and waste management and limiting work in progress, all of these ideas and more, they are present in our Agile methods and frameworks. I think they're present implicitly sometimes, you know, so they're not labeled as such, but they're there. For example, in Scrum, I don't think you can achieve a working increment, a product increment consistently, unless you're a cross-functional lean team who understands things like WIP and so on, right? So I think they're there and I think we need them. the spirit and the essence of Lean is absolutely there, but also for me, the kind of linking, the manifestation of that is the Kanban method. The Lean Kanban method, from my sketchy memory of the history, basically emanated from the TPS, the Toyota Production System days. And we have Lean Kanban. It's a great method. It incorporates explicitly all of those concepts of MUDA, of waste, waste management or waste elimination, limiting your work in progress, classes of service, so you can address different types of workflow, but you're optimizing flow, right? And I think that idea of flow, and for me, the difference is Lean is maybe more about optimization, and Agile, for me, and there are differences of opinion here, but for me, Agile maybe focuses or is more about innovation. So that's what I would say. Yeah, over to you, Arie.
Well, I agree with you, Sam, in terms of what it is today. I cannot imagine. For me, Lean and Kanban are part of the Agile domain. If you make Agile as an umbrella expression, and you have all those methodologies like FDD and TDD and extreme programming and DSDM and Scrum and less adaptive Crystal, you can list them all. For me, Lean and Kanban wasn't literally there being represented as a methodology when we wrote the manifesto, but I cannot work without the things like for example, the WIP limits and the visual management. It's like, for me, the way it has to be. I can't do without. And if I'm correct, one of the other authors of the Agile Manifesto said, "Oh, Scrum Lean is about efficiency in a car manufacturing environment, and Scrum is about efficiency in a software manufacturing environment." And therefore, it's part of the Agile domain as well, I think, because it was obviously one of the originators of Scrum. For me, it's essential. I can't do without it, not just in that I'm an agnostic, and I'm also not bound to IT only. I never did Agile exclusively in IT only, never, because if you make something, a new product or a service, it requires all necessary disciplines in an organization for your go-to-market. That might involve, I don't know, marketing or legal or any other stuff. And that means that you have, you have the full domain in your organization, and you use from the Agile domain what is necessary. And honestly speaking, for me being an agnostic, Lean concepts, Lean and Kanban concepts, extreme programming, for example, and still a lot of DSDM that I always use that help me doing the Agile work. So you have Lean, for me, is it's a no-brainer. Let me put it like this, right? That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, thank you both for the explanation. I just want to ask maybe another question. You've both mentioned now agnostic and agnostic Agile. Maybe it's interesting for the audience if you shortly explain what it exactly is and how it maybe differs from like Red Agile Manifesto, so people will know exactly what it is. Maybe one of you has some.
Sure. Well, I'll start off and Arie can continue. So agnostic Agile is really, for me as the author of the original document, is a throwback actually to the Agile Manifesto. It reminds us that Agile is not about one way of working. It's not about a particular method or framework. It's actually about embracing a variety of different ways of working and different practices, and really doing what's right for the organization that you are working with or for. And for me, it's also an ethical stance when it comes to Agile implementation as well, because we're not, pushing things on people. We are not pushing a certain body, a formal body on people. Rather, we are saying, look, there's lots of Agile practices and techniques and ways of working out there. They're all very useful in their own contexts, and also, when you get familiar with Agile as your so-called maturity level grows, I don't like to use that word, but the more experience you have, a little bit like the Shuhari model, which I won't go into now, the more you are able to really understand and look past the letter of how to do something, like how to do Scrum or how to do Kanban or how to do Safe or Less or whatever, And the more you understand the spirit of what they're trying to do, then you can make it your own. You can really evolve and grow your own agility. So that's where I'd stop. I could talk about this forever. Arie, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, what I can say from my perspective, especially because the publication of the Agnostic Agile Oath was in 2017, right?
Yes, early 2017.
I started working differently in 1994. I started with rapid application development, got into DSDM, but I've always been an agnostic. And for me, it means being open to learn, because if you have a really good best practice for you, that this helps me. I want to learn, I want to listen, I want to understand. And on top of what I said in question number 1, right, where you had people together in a room, right, working differently than the traditional waterfall stuff, but all having their own focus, all having their own way. It means that if you want to have a full body approach, and that's why I like the word practice, because practices are used by practitioners and not by people who stick to one thing dogmatically, because if you stick to one thing dogmatically, it hinders you from taking the learnings from others, right? So and in the late 90s, I was already I never did 100% DSDM. I always brought in other stuff because of, if I do this, it really helps me. And still today, if you look at what people do, you just look at the values and the principles. Okay, is it taking out the problems that we had in the waterfall way of working? Is it helping in other face-to-face communication and blah blah? And then you do it. And I don't even care where it comes from. For me, the methodologies are centers of innovation. And especially now, now we are remote. So before you know it, you do a 1-hour session somewhere and you get sucked into other meetings wherever you are that are already planned in your agenda. But when you're normally on site in a conference, I always like to attend those little sessions where people bring in practices, learnings from maybe not even from a methodology, not even a practice, but I think interesting. That's the one I keep. And we have to remember, this is where Agile comes from. Agile is not, a Bible that was written somewhere. This is about the fact that people started to investigate, how can we improve? So the moment that you stop investigating and experimenting, you didn't get it, right? Agile is about investigating, improving, implementing, trying to get, so you're never done. And that makes you an agnostic if you are a true Agilist. Very simple.
Awesome.
Yes, well, thank you both for the explanation. So a bit impromptu, the question, but thank you for the explanation. So we're gonna move on to the next question. So the Agile Manifesto was written by people with pretty similar cultures. Most of the people were, a bit of the Western culture. So since then, has there maybe been a bigger influence from other cultures? And has there maybe been any conflicts between the Agile principles and different cultural values, where somebody said, okay, my culture conflicts with this specific principle, for example? Arie, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I was listening to you, Stefan. I think it evolved in the 90s, where it evolved because the culture facilitated that kind of thinking. I remember that. I have to imagine that it's May 1994, and I get a call from one of my managers. So that's someone who was on the board of the company, and he said, we're going to do a pilot with the Royal Navy. Just the fact that someone on the management team was already thinking about, okay, we have to do things in a different way. It's typical Dutch. And then, in the terms of being in the Netherlands, I can tell you Dutch people always have an opinion, and they are very willing to share it with you. And sometimes it's obnoxious. Sometimes it's, I think, oh, can you shut up, one time, please? At the same time, it keeps you sharp. It makes problems, very visible, and that opens the way to solutions. That level of equality where you are not so impacted by hierarchy as in some other cultures was also present in, for example, in the Nordic, Scandinavia, Denmark. So we have my world in the mid and late 90s was UK, Benelux, the Nordic, Scandinavia, And you could see we were all trying to do these kind of things together. These days, I travel the world. And of course, you can see that the transparency, for example, that you need, to get agile. I mean, transparency is the carrier of agile. Empowering people is the carrier of agile as well. Those are very important pillars. And in some cultures, and that can be a regional culture, can be a country culture, but can also be a company culture. In some cultures, people are not used to it. People are afraid, or just not used to doing it. And that's why I think, I mean, everybody forced by technology and other stuff, for example, the COVID crisis that we had, we are really, we need to change the way we work. We need to change the way we approach our market, whether you're a government or a for-profit organization, it doesn't matter. So the urge is everywhere, because if you are late, don't worry, competition will be on time. And that same technology that is forcing you into change is also facilitating competition from other places on the globe, where they have maybe less hierarchy and more empowerment. So you need to catch up with this. At the same time, Stefan, the question as it is, conflicts. For me, conflict is always, oh, that's a struggle and it's difficult, and I don't like to think this way. But you can see, okay, we have areas with extra attention to get into agile working, really. If you want to get it going, because it requires that deep disruptive change when it comes to empowerment and transparency and getting rid of hierarchy and that kind of thing. Yeah, and in some cultures, if you get your status in your social environment based on the hierarchical position that you have, why should you let go of it once you got there, right? So you have those kind of things that you need to overcome, but at the same time, I see very good results across the globe. And I talk to people literally on every continent on a weekly basis, where people are trying to work agile. So the need is there. Maybe there's a cultural flavor depending on where you are in the world. But in the end, because we all need to get into that corporate capability to respond to change fast and with a high level of quality, you will see that on every continent, we will start moving to the same position, being fast and making sure that we can do as an organization what we need to do on time. Sam?
I love what Arie just said. I just want to add that, there is something about Agile that is a movement. There is something about Agile that is grassroots. There is something about Agile that speaks to your heart, right? It's not just about organizations and corporations and doing transformations. It comes from a much deeper place. And so I have observed in countries where they are more prone to starting movements and wanting to change things, it's very interesting, because my experience with, helping to foster the agnostic agile movement, for example, we have a lot of people from such places where there are movements and public things going on, who really are into this agile thing, right? And agnostic agile as well. And I think, wherever there is, like Arie said, wherever there's hierarchy that don't want to budge, wherever there is leadership that are very outmoded in terms of the way they operate, you always have people. And for me, Agile is all about people doing the change, people being the change that they want to see. And we are always going to have that kind of resistance with the status quo, if you like. So for me, Agile is a spirit as much as it is a letter, if I can express it like that. It is about the will to do something for the greater good and to change for the greater good, as much as it is about getting product to market faster and more sustainably, and doing leadership and so on. So I guess I just wanted to give a slightly different spin to what I was saying there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you both very much. I really loved your answer, and basically taking away maybe some of the prejudice around culture and hearing that Agile is, is overcoming this. Well, like Arie said, they're not really conflicts. He doesn't see it like that. That was nice to hear. So I wanted to thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to the next question now. So agile frameworks and tools are rising and developing in diverse directions. So we have all kinds of tools. We already talked about it before. Do you sometimes maybe feel that like the Agile Manifesto is jeopardized by some of these new tools? Arie?
The tooling is a complicated one. I always see, two types of tooling. One type of tooling is the one that you need for your delivery, for your agile delivery. Every day thing, DevOps technology, integration, testing, the deployment, everything that goes on there. And the other side is the agile collaboration, because visual management, face-to-face collaboration, and even that one you can split in two, where you say, okay, we have this thing going on the side of what we do now right here, because I always get the question, oh, what do you think in the COVID times? Of course, we talk about face-to-face communication, and now we're now geographically distributed. We are at home, and what do you think about it? Also, this is face-to-face. The only thing that I miss is that I don't smell you. It's not necessarily a disadvantage in some cases, I can tell you. So and I know really being in a room is really helpful, but that you have that communication tool, then you have the tool that's helping you to break down everything from all the way up, the value that you're looking for, into the deepest definition of done, and bringing that onto a visual board that we can share wherever you are in the world. And then of course bringing that into your agile delivery tools, right? So the tooling is a complicated work, and you see really good tools. I'm working with a couple of companies at the moment. They develop tools, and I'm really impressed. I cover all those three, and they are connected, so it really gets happy. I'm finalizing this, so I hope within the next 1-2 months, really to have it live, because then we piloted it, and I'm really excited about it. So that's one. But as you have with tooling, it's also with frameworks. When the framework or the tool becomes the business model, it loses the value for agile working, because people start pushing it because their bonus is connected to it, or at least their income, right? And then you forget about what it is. And I see tools that are very well known in the agile world that absolutely don't support agile working. So I don't understand, excuse my French, one fuck, why people are using it all the time, because it doesn't help. But that comes along. I think in any domain you have people for the benefit of themselves, and that's what I like about agnostic, right? Just bring in, come on, what do you have? Come on, bring it in, right? And share. I always say, the agnostic thing is about using from the frameworks what helps you most. And then especially when I'm on stage, I might say, and I do it very often, and if you, out of a retrospective of any kind of moment, what you have, you bring your new own agile practice, you define it, you start doing it, it's useful, go on stage and share it with others, because that's what it should be. The moment that you start selling it, right, then okay, then we have a different angle on it. But coming back to the manifesto, for me, it's still very vivid. Most companies are far from it, so there's still a long way to go. And in my opinion, the practices from the frameworks help. The tools, there are tools more and more helping you. That's what it should do. If something new, I don't like to criticize other people's work. So if there's something, look what's in it for you. Look what can help you. But the moment that it's the framework that becomes more important than the company, or the tool that becomes more important than the team, then we know we're at risk. Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's worked with me knows that I'm not a fan of some of the most popular tools out there. I really think they are used to beat teams over the head and to beat people over the head, and I am really against that. I think as long as the tools are for the teams and by the teams, elected by the teams, if you like. If we're talking about day-to-day things, tracking, delivery, and all that stuff, then I think great. If they support individuals and interactions over processes and tools, great. For me, it gets a tick in the box. But the moment you work for the tool, forget it. It's over. The tool works for you, right? That's what I'd say, and I'll just leave it there.
I have an expression, Sam. A fool with a tool, still a fool.
Agreed. Agreed, yeah. Yeah.
I think those are some very wise words to live by. Yes. Thank you both very much. We're going to move on to the next question. This one is also about the Agile Manifesto, more specifically the word software. So we've seen, for example, that Agile has started to evolve where it's also being used in like regular business, for example. And some people are now saying that the word software can basically be removed from the description of the Agile Manifesto. Do you agree with that? I'm going to start with Arie, considering he, wrote the Agile Manifesto.
Yeah, full-hearted, 100%. Of course, software should be replaced by something like product or solution or service or something like this, because software on itself doesn't do anything. It's the software and the people and how you handle it that brings the value. And in the production process, if you have on that same backlog that makes results into that product or that service, you don't cover the marketing aspects that you need, or you don't cover the legal, or you don't cover, that means that, I mean, if you have all those things together and one of them is late, the whole thing is late, and you don't want to be, you cannot allow yourself to be late anymore. So the one thing that I regret is that I didn't pay attention to the word software in the manifesto when we wrote it. Because I like to use the expression full delivery, where I say, if I bring this solution, and even if it's a 100% software solution, then I still need to bring it to the market, covering everything that's in there, right? All the way from marketing. There are still countries where Uber is not allowed, because Uber is a great technology solution, but the legal aspects are not covered in that country, so you can't go live, period, right? So that means that at that moment in time, you can see the impact if you don't do the full delivery. So for me, if you look at the question itself, I say don't remove software, but replace it by product, solution, or service or anything, and then understand that you have to create backlogs where all required disciplines to be able and allowed to go to production are involved. So not just IT bullshit. Sam.
So I love how Arie has just taken this, the vocabulary we are allowed to use, to a whole new level. So maybe I can engage more of my vocabulary too. So look, for me, this is why I think when I said for me, it's a lot about the spirit. If you read between the lines of the manifesto and you don't take it absolutely literally, well, let's put it this way. If you do take it absolutely literally, then you're going to have a problem with the word software. If you understand, if you have the understanding that you can replace the word software with whatever outcomes your team is creating and developing, or your organization is creating or developing, if you have that understanding, then it's perfectly fine the way it is, But in a world where we need to be more explicit, I think that I don't know, whether or not we change the word software. I think the manifesto should be left alone. That's my opinion. But the way we teach it and the way we ascribe to it and refer to it, we have to make it suit the context that we're in. Because honestly, the principles of the manifesto, the 12 principles, the 4 values, I think they are pretty much timeless. They have stood the test of time so far. But something can only stand the test of time if it can apply continuously to different things. And that's what we get with the Agile Manifesto. And if you are speaking to a software team, then you want to use the word software. If you are speaking to a team that does something else, then you want to use whatever word means something to them. Look, that's my view on it, So there's a lot of debates. Should we change this? Should we change that? I completely understand Arie when he says, that's the one word that, maybe they got a little bit, or he got a little bit hung up on. But, it's fine the way it is. That's what I think.
It's interesting to hear the author of the manifesto saying that he might replace it, but someone else saying that for him it's perfectly fine. It shows the difference in opinions, even within Agile, I assume. Just wondering about agnostic Agile. So I know that you wrote not really a manifesto, but a similar piece of document. Do you mention software in there as well, or is it already left out there?
No, we don't actually. We don't mention software. It's a little bit higher level than that. So we mention a lot of things, but it's more about, you know, there are different principles. I encourage people to visit agnosticagile.org and to read through these principles, and then hopefully you'll get it straight away. But really, it's about being non-dogmatic with Agile, with agility, recognizing that there are different, not only different types of frameworks and practices you can use as a practitioner that you should be familiar with, you know, as a practitioner, but also the fact that we have to respect each other as practitioners. It does not matter if, you know, Joe Bloggs over there is a Scrum trainer and Jane Doe over there is a Kanban trainer, or even a scaled Agile trainer. You know, all of these have their place in their context, and they all have value. They have value. That's why they exist. Okay, so a lot of the principles in the Agnostic Agile document kind of speak to that. They speak to respecting each other. They speak to understanding that there's more than one way to do something. They speak to putting your customer first and foremost, or your organization first and foremost, because that's what you're doing it for. And by the way, it also speaks to the fact that Agile is not the end goal. Agile is actually a means to an end. It is the best way we know how to do something to get an outcome. And we all want the outcome. That's what we want. That's why we're all in business. That's why we're all working, right? For that valuable thing. So for me, that's what it is.
Well, thank you very much for these insights. I thought it was very nice to hear. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So both of you have worked on Agile transformation in companies. How do you use the Agile Manifesto to inspire people? And are there maybe also any doubts that come from people when you use the Agile Manifesto? We can start with you, Sam, this time.
Sure. I can tell you a story here. Okay. Firstly, on the first part of the question, yeah, absolutely. I worked on a few big transformations, the most recent one being in Australia. And one of the ways we used the Agile Manifesto was to anchor it against the company's values and to realize and get everybody to realize, actually, our company's values are almost identical, to the Agile Manifesto values. And that is an amazing way to anchor the meaning of why we are here and the purpose of what we are doing. And so there actually was a great piece of work that both myself and the team that I worked with did, where we had we actually had the company's values first on the left-hand side, then we had the Agile Manifesto values, and then we had some of the principles, and then we had the practices, but not all of it. We had practices that worked for us, which we called common practices. And it was a great way to create that narrative, that story, from the company's origins and what they stood for to what the Agile Manifesto stands for, which is very, very similar, down to the practices that we're about to teach you and how we're transforming. So that's the first thing I would say. I think that's very inspiring for people. Now, there are always doubts. There are always people who challenge, and that's great. You know, we need people like that because we need to be able to respond and we need to be able to tell the story better. So there was one or two situations where I was in, when I was giving a talk or we were doing some work in a transformation, and I recall this situation where there was about 100 people in the room, and what we were doing is that we were explaining to people why we are changing, why the organization is going on this journey, and the Agile Manifesto was a huge part of that. But there was always the naysayers, one or two naysayers in the crowd, and somebody put their hand up and they said, yeah, but you know, Boeing went agile, and look what happened to their airplanes. It crashed, right? That actually happened. And it was a little bit inappropriate for the situation, the professional situation. But, you know, we responded I think, very appropriately. I'm not going to, you know, spare you the actual detail of the response, but after we talked to the person, there's always a reaction to changing to something new. And here's what I think. And I know this is said many times, but when people feel like change is being done to them, they will react. when people feel like they are part of the change, in fact, they are co-creating the change with us, then you will get a much more favorable response from them, right? One person actually asked me, and I have to tell this story. One person asked me, or actually asked somebody else in the room, another presenter, hey, so Scrum will solve all our problems, will it? Agile will solve all our problems, will it? And the presenter says, she goes, look, there's no silver bullets. That's not what we're saying. She turns to me, big mistake. She turns to me and she goes, Sam, do you have a magic wand? And I turned to her and I said, I do, but I'm not going to show it to you. And everybody laughed because, you know, you have to make a joke out of these things, right? But I think change is about co-creation, and doubts will always be there. That's when we have to pull people in, not push them away. And I'll just finish on that. Arie, what about you?
Yeah, I use the manifesto for inspiration. This is most of the time the part where people get along. The moment that it gets personal, oh, it has impact on me and what I do, and you know what I am, quote unquote, what I am, right? Then people start having doubts, and I don't have a problem with using the word resistance. I like to say, you know, there is no such thing as resistance. They're just people not ready yet. But you have to accept that some people will not be ready during your lifetime. That happens. And the big thing to understand is that agile working itself on the outside is simple. It's really not complicated. And I'm not talking about the tech stuff, but agile working, the collaboration, super simple. Right? It's basically having the right people at the right time talking the right way about the right stuff. That's basically what it is, you know, whether it's in dailies, retros, heartbeats, that kind of stuff. So fine, not complicated. To make that work, however, you need to have 1, 2, 3 layers below. You have to bring change in the organization. That whole ecosystem of that team has to work. And it's about the transparency. It's about changing standards for example, for reporting, going from progress reports to visual management, and you know, empowering people from silo profile to T-shaped profile and that kind of thing. And then it becomes complicated for people because people simply don't like change. That little reptile brain is in every one of us, and people are not open to change. I always say you cannot change anybody else. If you think you're a coach, you can change people. Sorry, forget about it. You can't. People can only change themselves. And that is if they make the choice. You can make people do other stuff, but the moment you're gone, they will go back to what they want to do. So if you can take them with you on the journey, and you can invite them to little experiments to feel and see things that can help to improve their current way of working, then you're making steps. If you look at the last question, because there are 2 questions on screen now, right? And are there any doubts that come from people? Always. I had one of the coaches here in Humanity saying to me, you know, I will stop doing this job because I am sick and tired of working with grumpy old guys that don't want anything. And where it comes from is that the longer that people are in an organization with the established bureaucracy, all the predefined roles and processes and exactly what you can't and can and cannot do, the longer you're in there, the stronger those habits get, and changing habits is very difficult. And the letting go of habits that you've known for years is painful. Literally can be literally painful. I've seen people crying because they were asked to sit with their team instead of sitting in another part of the building. They were crying because they had to leave their desk. This is how deep habits are, you know, how deep they are in the human brain. And we have to respect that it can be painful, you know, it's leaving the comfort zone, right? So is there a doubt? The doubt is always the outer layer. The outer layer, you know, not most of the time not really representing why they don't want to change, why they don't want to do it. It's just the way that it manifests, the way they bring it out, they express it. But the reason for people not, you know, being open to so much change is there all the time. And those doubts are formulated in many ways. But it's the source is always people don't like change. I mean, you do Agile all over the world at the moment, and you see teams doing awesome things, great results. And the question I got after the talk was, is there any academic proof? I said, why do you need academic proof if there's empirical proof in front of you? Why? But this is where it goes. And by the way, this was also one of the grumpy old guys asking that question. Or they will tell you you're a liar, right? It happens. Never give up, always go through. And at this moment in time where we are, for the people who are in doubt, I always say, look where you are as an organization. COVID has forced organizations to dramatically change their business models. Technology is disrupting business models all the time. So you need to do something, whether you call it agile or not, but you need to develop that corporate capability to respond to change. And that's what I try to have. Okay, how can we make it better? Because at this moment in time, we have problems. How can we solve it? But people will fight for what they've learned over their life. That's what we know.
So
Yes.
Arie, I have just a really quick one. I have a saying as well. I have a quote sometimes I use. Familiarity breeds confidence. So I think that's why Agile's got such a momentum in the world, because once 1, 2, 3, 4 companies start doing it successfully, others see it, and before you know it, it takes off. And the more familiar people are with some basic things, at one point in time, they could just leave it there, and then much later on, they can come back to some of these things, and they can say, oh yeah, I've looked at that before, I've seen that before. And I think that whole resistance kind of comes down a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, thank you both very much. Also heard a lot of nice tips, I think, for people who might work with agile transformations now or in the future. So we're gonna this is the last question that we have. After this, we are maybe gonna try and get through a couple of audience questions. So if you have any questions, make sure to type them. Then after this question, we will go through them. So the question is it necessary to update the Agile Manifesto values and principles? Are there any outdated elements? I think I already heard Sam say earlier that he thinks that it's perfectly fine and should leave untouched, but maybe there's still something, Sam, that you say like, well, we can change, but maybe not in the manifesto itself.
Okay, so this is a slightly different question. The previous question was about the word software specifically. Now, my view on this question specifically is it's similar, but it's not the same. For me personally, and of course, this is just a personal opinion, this is one of those fun questions that people like to talk about a lot. So I think we don't look at it as, do we need to update the Agile Manifesto? I think we look at it, if we were in a team and we produced a product, will we want to iterate on that product, yes or no? I think that's an interesting way of looking at this question. And of course, the Agile answer is, well, yeah, we want to continuously improve, right? Or maybe we want to refine. So I'm not saying yes or no, we shouldn't, but I'm saying from an Agile perspective, in my opinion, we would iterate and refine. Yeah. What do you think, Arie?
I've seen over the last 10 to 15 years so many different manifestos, the test manifesto and the analysis manifesto and whatever. And I always say, when those kind of publications help you, and just being with a group of people, thinking about it, writing about it, and then publishing it, if that helps you moving forward, I think it's awesome. The tools that we use today, because I use things like Viber and WhatsApp and Telegram and those kind of things, they evolve all the time. Awesome, great. The other side is, and that's something that I said before as well, is that there's still so many organizations struggling with what the manifesto says today in its current version. Go for it, and when you're there, come with a better version, let us know. What we as a group of manifesto authors said, leave it, right? Because if you go to update it, who's going to take the responsibility for keeping it and serving it? Leave it. If you want to publish your own, go ahead, right? Go for it. But that's more the practicality.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I hope to see many more manifestos in the future coming by. So for now, I'm just gonna do one more thing before we go to the questions. I'm just gonna show our certification program, just in case you wanna learn more about Agile. So from Exin, we have a bunch of different Agile Scrum certifications. But we also have, for example, the Exin Agile Coach, which focuses on Agile transformation and bringing the mindset across to other people. And you just heard some nice tips from Arie and Sam if you are interested in doing this. So if you are interested in learning more about Agile, you can check these out. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar as well later. So then I will include some links for you to click. But for now, I'm gonna go through some questions, and then Sam or Arie, whenever you think you have a good answer, just shout it out. So the first question is about, I think this was related to when we were talking about the culture and the differences that might come. And someone asks, is it maybe also a money problem where some countries are, of course, not as wealthy as other countries? Does this also play an issue in this thing?
Shall I take it, Sam? Yeah. I don't think money is an issue, because if you really do Agile in a proper way, you will be more cost efficient, because the way you interact means that you are much closer to what the company really needs, or maybe spot on, so you don't need rework on that side. If you work in a proper way and really disciplined with your definition of done, you deliver high quality work, so you have less bugs, so you have less rework that way. So I think you will be delivering much better stuff just by doing in a different way. And even you can work Agile without any kind of tools, right? Outside the world of IT. You can do full recruitment campaigns or event organizing completely in an Agile way, very efficient, with multidiscipline teams, very helpful. I don't think money is the problem. I know money is never the problem. What we see, and then I hand over to Sam, what we see is that we have, I think it's because a young professional domain, we have companies making absolutely insane amount of monies, especially in the larger consultancy firms. I bump into very junior people that ask daily rates that are higher than the most senior one that we have at Humanity. And I think, okay, and what are you going to do to bring value for that money? And it's not about, bringing value for money. It's about just, ripping off the client. That's more the model. And that's a problem. But in general, no. Sam.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick because we do want to get more questions in, don't we? I also think it's not about the money. It's never really about the money. There are so many good independent Agile practitioners out there who can really add a lot of value to the organization. And what I will say is this: I think these huge, large consultancies that Arie is referring to, I work alongside them a lot, and I am astonished at the capability, right, or the lack of capability when it comes to Agile. I'm just going to say it, absolutely astonished. And I think slowly this industry is realizing that. And all I can say is let rise the age of the independent Agile practitioners who are agnostic and who will do good for the client, because I think that's where eventually we're heading.
Yes, thank you very much. We actually right now have one more question, but if any other ones have one, you can do it in now before we stop. Could you both maybe elaborate on the role of leadership in organizations? Someone asked, for when it comes to Agile, implementing Agile, I assume.
Sam, you first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I was having a discussion about this with my brother last night, actually. And I said to him, isn't it funny how we graduated from university, or we came out of school, and one of the things we are doing now is we're teaching people, generally speaking, older than us or leaders, how to be open, how to be respectful, how to empower their teams. Isn't it funny that we have to, in some cases, treat leaders like kindergarten kids? Because that's what I see. I'm just being honest. Some of the material that we have to approach leaders with is, it's a shame we have to do this. It's a shame we have to be like this. So for me, leadership is really absolutely fundamental to any successful endeavor, especially an Agile endeavor in an organization. And before I hand over to Arie, I'm just going to say this. There was a historical culture once upon a time, and I don't want to say who yet because I don't have the full references. The moment I have the references, I'm going to post it. They elected their leader like this. They said, who wants to be the next leader of our community? Who wants to be the next leader for our nation or our tribe? And a lot of people put their hands up, and they discounted all of those people who put their hands up, because the best leaders, and I think we all know this working in organizations, the best leaders sometimes are people who do not want to be leaders, but my God, they can lead. They can corral the troops, they can inspire people, they work for people, they serve people. You know, they are the embodiment of servant leaderships. And they are the ones who are not influenced by politics. Because for me, a lot of the leadership we see today is actually, it's not because they want to get that greater good and do a genuinely good job in leadership. Sometimes it is, of course, I'm not generalizing, but oftentimes it's because people are climbing up the hierarchical ranks and they're making political plays, and that's how they get into the positions they are. And that is why we need these leadership frameworks to teach people how to lead, right, in an agile way, in a servant kind of way. I'll just stop there and I'll hand it over to Arie. I hope that was an interesting perspective for you.
I think, thank you, Sam. I think when it comes to agile working, especially agile transformations, any transformation, by the way, the leadership is the make or break. And the reason I say this is it's very simple. You know, if you want your organization to start doing different things, you have to role model it. If you're not role modeling, people look at you. You're a role model. If you don't do it, they won't, right? So first of all, you have to start doing it yourself. Secondly, the change that it needs to be able to work in this way is something that the people themselves cannot establish. You know, sometimes you have to change organizational structures. Very often you have to change organizational structures. That requires involvement from the leadership. So you need, on one hand, you need lead by example, so you have the role model. On the other side, you have to facilitate that change. You need to be part of it. You need to understand it. You need to feel it. You need to see the value of it. Otherwise, you know, you're doing the wrong things. And then the third one going into agile working is that we don't know what to do when things go wrong, because we go into this agile way of working, it's new to us or whatever. And the moment that you do something for the first time, it's not going to be brilliant. The moment that you don't do things really for a long time, you might make mistakes. And what we do as leadership people, we very often, you know, instantly start telling people what to do to solve the problem. And the problem is, your solution is in your own brain, is something from the past based on traditional working. I call that innovating backwards. So next to being a role model and facilitating the change, you have to sustain the change by innovating forward and saying to a team, hey, you're having a struggle. Sit down, do a retrospective, make sure you get the solution. If you need something in implementing that solution, let me know and I'll help you. Right? But let them identify themselves what's going on and really get to that improvement, and don't make the mistake to step in and do it for them, because instantly, you know, you sustain old habits. So those three, you know, role modeling, facilitating change, and sustaining the change are essential, and not just for the next 3 months, but for the next of your, you know, the rest of your life. You have to do this. I always say, you know, going into agile working, it's like when you're overweighted and you go on a diet. If you really want to fight you being overweighted, it needs that you accept things that they are different, and you need to do that different for the rest of your life, right? Otherwise, you go back into, you know, the old situation, and that's what we need to understand. So leadership is essential, and I'm using the word leadership, not management. Leadership.
Thank
Right,
you
so,
both very much. Yes, so yeah, we're over time right now, so we have one more question. Maybe we can just do this one very short, just a short answer. Someone is saying, yes, so in a lot of well-known universities, they still teach the waterfall module and they still stick to traditional product management modules. Do you know why they do that, or maybe why people would still stick to these?
Yeah, I know. I'm jumping ahead, Sam. I have to say, Stefan, that I lectured at the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences for 20 years, to the day, 20 years. And I left disappointed because if I can give it in a couple of lines, being open to change is a competences that you will not find easily in the academic world. I'm sorry to say. It's only out there in the operational field where you feel the pain. You think, oh man, we have to do something different here, where change is an option. That, and in some university, in most, if not all universities, waterfall is still on the plate, and it shouldn't be. But this is the reason why, just not open to change. Old grumpy old guys. Sam.
So really quickly, yeah, I totally agree. But I want to end my answer on a positive note. It fills my heart with joy when I work with graduates in large organizations and they come in and they look at the waterfall methods and they say, why the hell are we doing it like this? Fills my heart with joy. When they look at the agile ways of working, when they're working on agile projects and initiatives, they're like, yeah, this is obvious. Like those people, when you're working with them, when you're mentoring or coaching or training them, they get it. They're like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. It's just common sense, and I love that. And so that's why I'm very hopeful for the future, and I'm very hopeful for new people coming out of university. I just hope we don't crush their spirits under the large organization structures. But that's why we're here, isn't that right, Arie?
Yeah, and I always, because I was once at the table with Mr. Kofi Annan just after he retired, being Secretary General for the United Nations. And I had a long conversation with for over an hour at the table with some people, like small group, like with 4 or 5. And I asked him a question, and he gave me the last line of his answer was, Arie, change always starts with one person. So never give up, do it, and it works. I mean, see where the Agile Manifesto is today. So it's there, right?
Yes, thank you both very much for your answers and for those final words. I think they were nice words to end on. So yeah, since we're done now, I want to thank both Arie and Sam very much. You've talked a lot. You gave us a lot of insights. I think it was really nice to hear from me personally, and I think a lot of the attendees also enjoyed it. And I wanted to thank anybody who attended and also asked questions. So for now, this was it. So once again, thank you very much, and we hope to see you later for another webinar. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for moderating.
Thank you,
Sam.
Stefan.
Thanks, been a pleasure
Thank
again.
you.
See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Pleasure, Arie.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.